assessment on my part. That was not advice that was provided to anybody, and I can't speak to our government officials, our minister and premier, and where their head was at on that. So I should be very clear about that. And that basis is just experience and the reaction. And this wouldn't have been February 3rd. This would have been much close to 8th or 9th that I was getting from my folks that were engaged in conversations with the industry when they were attempting to solicit support for the RCMP to use their equipment. It was categorically dismissed, and people were either not returning our calls point blank or telling us that they just would refuse to cooperate.
Did the RCMP ever request that this act be invoked?
No, they did not.
Okay, so we can pull up COU 6016. These are text messages between Minister Sawney, former Minister of Transport, and Mayor Willett. And we can go to the second page. We can go down a little bit. Okay, here. So you'll see here on the right, Mayor Willett says, he's talking about meeting with protesters. They need someone from government to get a straight answer from. If it comes up, are you still willing to take a trip to Coutts? And she responds, of course, I need to get clearance from the boss and RCMP. Were you consulted on whether the government should send an emissary of sorts to Coutts to meet with protesters?
To be clear, I've not seen this until my preparation for the inquiry, and this was provided to me. So I wasn't consulted. I know there were conversations at one point of MLAs independently meeting with protesters and having conversations with them. And that was, I've not seen anything to substantiate whether that actually occurred or not. My information is that it wasn't something that the government was officially trying to do, but again, I can't speak to whether it happened or not. I do know that during those conversations, we met with not we, myself, but our department spoke with our minister around that to make sure that we knew what may or may not be taking place and could convey that to the RCMP, of course, who are still charged with managing the event. The information that was conveyed to me was that there were no certainly official meetings taking place down there, and that they would be guided by the RCMP, who of course had operational command and were engaged in negotiations so as not to complicate any conversations that they might be involved in.
And do you know what the reason for? Because my understanding is that Minister Sawney did not end up going to Coutts. Do you know what the reason for that decision not to officially engage with the protesters was?
I don't. I can't put myself in the minister's mind. I apologize for that. I don't believe we received any requests from the RCMP, though, to engage at that level.
Okay.
So I suspect that might have been the reason.
In the institutional report, it says that the RCMP asked the Sheriff's Highway Patrol not to take enforcement action until February 7th. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you know why that was the case?
Again, the RCMP, I believe, were asking that we make sure that our officers did not take unilateral enforcement actions outside of their operational plan. I can only surmise, and I will leave it to Deputy Zablocki to confirm, but that would have been to ensure that any actions that we took didn't interfere with any negotiations that might have been ongoing with individuals at the site.
Okay. And so what changed on the 7th? Because I know after the 7th, there was a number of violations were issued. Do you know what changed?
That would have been a time, at the time, there was a sort of a very moderate or small enforcement, I guess you could term it enforcement initiative that the RCMP wanted to engage in, basically starting with information, if memory serves correctly, moving into, I think it was checkpoint 10 near Milk River, to have conversations with people, provide them with information, start charging vehicles, et cetera. So it would have been a coordinated effort based on the RCMP's operational plan and under their direction that our officers would have been involved in.
Do you know if any protesters left because of that limited enforcement action around that time?
I can't say that. I'm sorry. I'm sure the RCMP could tell you, but I just don't have that off the top of my head.
In the institutional report, it states that the province made an alternative protest site available, and we heard this from other witnesses at Milk River, and that would have been on February 10th. Can you tell us how that came about?
Absolutely. The RCMP actually suggested that it would be useful to them in their conversations with protesters if we were to make available a site that they could protest on that would meet their visibility needs but not obstruct traffic. We engaged with transportation and ourselves, but primarily transportation, in developing a site near Milk River which met the needs of the RCMP on property that we owned already. And transportation actually put in access and egress areas for protesters and set up, I believe, even Wi-Fi access for protesters to be able to utilize in order to facilitate those that wanted to protest lawfully at the site. This was a tactic that the RCMP wished to engage in to, manage the negotiations to migrate this to a lawful.
And did the RCMP brief you on whether that was done because there was buy-in from protesters on something like that, or done in hopes that once it was set up, they could get buy-in? Do you know?
They did. I don't recall knowing whether it was one or the other.
Okay.
There was a request, and of course we do what we could to assist, so we did it.
The institutional report states that the Sheriff's Highway Patrol maintains certain checkpoints at other points of entry to prevent blockades.
Near other points of entry, yeah. Yes, that's correct. Del Bonita and Carway were primarily the land ports of entry that we were concerned about. And under the direction of the RCMP, our sheriffs set up checkpoints there to ensure that vehicles traveling down to those points of entry had legitimate business reasons to be doing so.
And are you aware of whether any potential blockades were thwarted by those efforts or not?
I'm not. I couldn't speak to what could have been. So yeah, it's possible, but I'm not aware of anybody showing up and being turned away in en masse, if you will.
Yeah. I understand that on February 9th, I believe, a charge under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act was laid against Pastor Artur Pawlowski.
That's correct.
Is that the only charge that was laid under that act?
I don't want to misspeak here. Something tells me it was used twice, but certainly that's the only one that comes to mind.
So you understood that the act could apply to the situation?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And certainly Commissioner Zablocki and the RCMP would have a lot more fulsome detail on the charges they laid.
Did the RCMP ever explain to you why it wasn't utilized more?
why that particular act was not utilized more? No, I know that enforcement was a strategy that was being looked at on a case-by-case basis, moment to moment.
Well, it indicates that that's not in fact true, that his photograph that was circulating of Paul Brandt was 5 years old, right?
Correct. That's what it says there.
Paul Brandt is just for the benefit of whoever doesn't know, he's a well-known internationally successful country musician from Alberta, correct?
That's correct.
And there was a rumor, in fact, that he was going to come and perform a concert in support of the Coutts blockaders, right?
That was one of the two rumors that we heard involving Mr. Brandt.
If we go to page 13, you see Minister Sani still on the next day, February the 6th. She's asking, was food dropped off to the protesters by helicopter, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's the character of the rumor that was going on about Paul Brandt, that he dropped off food by helicopter, right?
Well, I don't see his name on this text, but certainly that was one of the rumors. Whether there was other rumors that the minister was hearing about other helicopter drops, there were, and I'm not even sure. I think by this point the NOTAM or the Notice to Airmen restricting airspace might have been in place as well. So that might have been. I don't want to put myself in the mind of the minister as to what she was inquiring about.
Sure. According to Mayor Willett, at least, he says Rebel rented a chopper and made a video,
Yeah.
which is what circulated. Is that according with your recollection of what happened there?
See, I'm not familiar with any information around Rebel News renting a chopper, but certainly that's the post from the mayor.
If we could go to ALB 401444, and I just want to suggest at any rate that what this notion about Paul Brandt renting a helicopter, coming to drop off food, putting on a concert, that was disinformation, right?
I believe it was. We actually conveyed that to the RCMP, and they had conversations with Mr. Brandt's personnel, and they claimed they indicated that they had no intention of providing a concert there and did not violate the NOTAM.
Okay, and if you go to the bottom of this page, this is a report to you from your PSIO director, yes?
Yeah, that's correct, sir.
On February 6th, and at that point, at 3:27 in the afternoon, he is saying that there's no credible public information confirming this Brandt helicopter story, but it appears plausible based on the aircraft itself. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, we share the same speed of talking, sir. Sorry. Yes, I do read that. There's that's based on the photograph that was received.
February 6th in finding a solution to the situation in Ottawa. So I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
I'm sorry, where is that in this?
That was in his testimony. I can bring up the transcript, but he did say in his evidence when he testified here at the commission that by February 6th, he did not feel that the province was engaged enough in finding a solution.
I don't accept that at all. I think that the province was very engaged in providing support to the City of Ottawa through a variety of means, including support for injunctions, including providing advice to the Police Service Board, including the provision of policing resources, including the provision of MTO resources. So I don't accept that at all.
Okay, and when you mentioned the injunction, what was the province's role with respect to the city's injunction?
I might be conflating the two injunctions, the one in Windsor and the one in Ottawa, but my understanding is that the Attorney General supported one of the two injunctions. I can't recall which one of the two, I'm sorry.
I believe that was Windsor. Yeah. So I'll take you to page 2, or the bottom of page 1, rather. Thank you. Ottawa City Council is likely going to ask the Premier and Prime Minister to intervene directly. The Mayor of Ottawa, Jim Watson, is feeling the pressure and want this issue to be pivoted back to Ontario and Canada. So it's fair to say that in this meeting it was communicated or it was expressed that Ontario or that Ottawa felt that it needed additional help both from the province and from the federal government, correct?
Yes.
And on page 2, If we go to the third bullet point, Mario Di Tommaso, that's you, Deputy Solicitor General, noted that the province expedited the approval of 249 special constables from the RCMP to assist Ottawa Police Service. So this is what we had looked at earlier, where there was an approval of RCMP officers to be sworn in as special constables.
Yes.
And so at this point, what else had Ontario done at this point by February 6th, other than what you've indicated there?
Provided significant resources to the Ottawa Police Service from the OPP, significant number of resources.
Okay, so so the OPP provided resources, and was there anything else?
Yes, I believe MTO was involved in providing their resources.
Okay, and if we go to page 5.
And I believe there was continuing advice to the Ottawa Police Service Board from the advisors. And I'd have to check my notes, but the province was heavily engaged at this point in time.
Okay, but you can agree that Ottawa doesn't seem to think so. They're expressing that they don't think there is enough engagement, right? Whether or not that's accurate, that's their sense that they're conveying.
Yes.
And at page 5, if we go to the first black bullet at the bottom, keep going, yes. Question for Mario Di Tommaso, Deputy Solicitor General. Has Ottawa Police Service been working with the Ministry of the Attorney General
of the Ottawa community, right?
I accept that.
They said, quote, people are living in fear and are terrified, and they've now been subjected to the nonstop honking of large trucks for 9 days, which is tantamount to psychological warfare.
I accept that.
Were you aware that that's how serious it was at the time, the honking of the horns?
Yes.
And they say we need a dramatic and immediate injection of additional officers. And then they get into the following resources required on an urgent basis. So that was sent on the 7th. I gather the Solicitor General would have consulted you on that letter?
I don't remember consulting with her or her and I having a discussion about that. Suffice to say that that request went directly to the Commissioner of the OPP to make an assessment on the appropriateness of that number and whether or not to deploy the resources.
So I'll get into that issue in a moment, but I'm just wanting to understand first about whether you were consulted by the Solicitor General on that issue, in the letter.
I was not. My recollection is that her position was that the requests for resources were with the Commissioner of the OPP.
Right. And she wrote to the mayor and the chair about that on February the 10th, 3 days later. Do you know why there was such a delay?
I don't.
And there's nothing in the letter about, you know, the honking or the risk to safety of Ottawa residents, just saying, please note that I have shared your correspondence with Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner Thomas Creek. Thank you again for taking the time to write. Why did it take the Solicitor General 3 days just to say she's passed on the letter to the Commissioner? Do you know?
I don't know, but I also wanted to flag what's in that letter is her focus that the request was passed on to the Commissioner, and she references the operational plan as well.
4 of the Police Act, correct? That's its interpretation of that section.
I won't fight you on that.
Okay.
I accept that.
All right, and that it's especially important to provide those suggestions or opinions on operational plans to ensure that they're consistent with legal requirements and community norms and values.
And board policies and board objectives, yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, sir, we've reviewed a number of your handwritten notes that arise out of the facts that we're reviewing with the commission. And I just want to get a sense of your note-taking practice. Do you essentially take notes of all of your telephone calls and meetings?
No.
Okay, so this is a selection of notes that you had arising from these events.
Right, this was a major event. and I reverted to my past practice as a police officer in taking as many notes contemporaneously as I possibly could. There are gaps. I did not record each and every discussion that I had. I simply didn't have that capacity.
Okay, thank you. And so if you had been providing reports to the Solicitor General, there may not be notes of those reports, even if you may not be notes of those, even though you provided those reports.
Correct.
And what was your practice with reporting to the Solicitor General with respect to these events? Would you have been at the beginning of these events, was she asking you to report to her daily on the events?
So the practice was with regards to the daily situational reports that were coming in to me from Commissioner Carrick, I would do a copy and paste and send the same text message to the minister.
By text message?
Yes.
And would she schedule calls with you if she had follows up or questions with respect to Commissioner Carrick's reports?
Yes.
And you would also have meetings with her in person and I assume by telephone?
Correct.
But you would not necessarily take notes of those discussions?
Correct.
Thank you. And if I understand your evidence, at the beginning of these events, your characterization of them was that this was a police issue that required the correct deployment of police resources.
Correct.
And you did not see this as necessarily a political issue.
That would be fair. However, there was a role for ministers and politicians to play with regards to exploring possible solutions.
The art of the possible, as you stated. Okay. And would it be fair, now, you had a number of discussions with Deputy Minister Stewart at the federal level, correct?
Yes.
And those were kind of at the bureaucracy level of discussions.
Yes.
And is it fair to say that you got the sense from him that the federal political level was frustrated that there was not more engagement from the Ontario provincial level?
Yes.
Okay. And in my review of the documents, it appears that the political engagement from Ontario appeared to shift around February 9th. Would that be fair?
No. I know that Minister Jones and the Premier were certainly engaged in many bilateral conversations throughout this entire period.
So when do you feel like the provincial government became more involved at a political level? At what point in time?
I can't determine that because I was not privy to those conversations. I knew that both Premier Ford and Minister Jones were having many.
Folks, if you want to be kept up to date on what's happening at the Emergency Act Inquiry, including my live tweets and some clips and highlights that occurring at the Emergency Act Inquiry, by heading over to revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. That's revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. And of course, here, folks, while you're there, please head over to donorbox.org/Emergency Act Commission. That's donorbox.org/Emergency Act Commission. And of course, here, folks, if you could chip in a buck or two, that will be greatly appreciated, as it will help me cover my travel expenses, including my expenses on food, as bringing you these stories doesn't come for free. Thank you so much.